Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Thomas Crooks acted alone, and so did Brian Cole. Almost 5 years after those pipe bombs were placed outside the RNC and the DNC, an arrest was made yesterday. A Virginia man that Jake Tapper says is white. As I said, it's not material, but he's just not. It's just really comical. They're impossible to parody. People like Jake Tapper, impossible to satirize. Brian Cole taken into custody. Dan Bongino on Hannity last night saying, while the investigation remains open, they didn't gather any new evidence. They just did a review of the existing evidence, and they tracked this guy down, and they got their guy.
Yeah, that's why I said to you, this investigation's just begun. We are pretty comfortable. We have our guy. I think as again, legal process starts to surface and information, facts start to come out, the public's going to be very comfortable with the investigation that was conducted under Director Patel and his leadership. He's been great on this. But I don't want to, listen, I was paid in the past, Sean, for my opinions. That's clear. And one day I'll be back in that space. But that's not what I'm paid for now. I'm paid to be your deputy director, and we base investigations on facts. And, it was interesting. I was looking out in the crowd today at the presser, and I saw a couple of media figures who you and I both know who promoted the other scandal, the collusion hoax. And I thought to myself, the difference between us and them is, we evolve. As information and new inputs come out, we can produce different outputs because that's what we believe in. We believe in facts and investigations guided by facts. There were people out there in that crowd, I'm sure still believe in this collusion fairy tale hoax. So we'll see. We're going to be guided by the facts as this thing goes forward.
Mm-hmm. For perspective on this, pleased to be joined again by James Gagliano, retired FBI supervisory special agent, doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. He also served as mayor of the village of Cornwall-on-Hudson in New York. Jim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Dan, always good to join you. I understand that it's almost as cold in Chicago than where I am here in New York. We were at 9 degrees this morning, my brother.
Yeah, well, you're a hardy people, as are we. Well, we'll get through it. So the Cash and Tango show yesterday, what do you make of that? What do you make of the arrest of Mr. Cole and what Cash and Dan had to say about that yesterday?
All right, so two separate things. So let me take these in order. On the investigation side, I caution people. The argument is, and I understand it from a layperson's perspective, the argument is it took 5 years. What took so long, and why just now? And yes, you had 2 unexploded devices, one at the RNC, their headquarters, and one at the DNC, which is confusing because if somebody's on an ideological bent, is this an anarchist, a nihilist that just wants to blow everything up, or is this somebody that was trying to target a specific group? They had a grievance. It's very confusing. But you had 2 unexploded devices, and typically in a post-blast investigation, Dan, the thing that makes it so tough is this. There is no way that you can collect up clean evidence because the evidence gets destroyed when the bomb goes off. So you had 2 unexploded devices. They were novice devices. I mean, looking at the components, how they were put together, novice devices. But investigations take time. And for all the people that are chirping and saying, they slow walk this, I disagree with that. The men and women of the FBI didn't do that. You can blame Christopher Wray, you can blame, the deputy director, Paul Abate, but that didn't happen here. The fact that this was solved now, it was a cold case. You put fresh sets of eyes on it, and kudos to Dan and Cash, but enough with the victory tour. And that takes me to the political piece that you just kind of highlighted there. It was cringe for me yesterday to watch that press conference. The deputy director is historically a position whereby you are like the commandant of cadets at West Point. You're not the face. That's the 3-star general, the superintendent. You're the person that keeps order and discipline. It's the same in the FBI. Why is Dan Bongino out there giving these interviews, putting himself out there publicly, doing social media? I understand modernity. I understand the evolution of things. I understand communication changes. But, Dan, I thought it was an embarrassing look yesterday. And this is the guy that, remember, had pushed this narrative that the government was behind the pipe bombs being set and the government was covering it up. And now, as he pointed out, well, I get paid for something different. Before, I was paid for opinions. Now I'm paid not to put out rage clickbait. It was just disappointing, Dan. That's my feeling and my take on that.
Well, I agree with you about the chest beating. I talked about that earlier in the show, and talking like a politician, and also just sort of cheap law enforcement bravado. Like, these guys have watched High Noon one too many times. Just spare me the Gary Cooper routine, okay? I just want to understand what happened and what's happened over the last 4.5 years and how it culminated in the arrest yesterday. And I didn't get a lot on that. And so I need more on that. I need to understand, fresh set of eyes, cold cases. I get it conceptually. So tell us what happened. There's got to be people that were in the agency and on this case that are still in the agency. So how did they miss this guy for all this time? What was the kind of resources devoted initially and subsequently? What did the leadership of the FBI do or say as it pertains to this case? Talk about Wray and Abate, as you just mentioned, over the course of their time. I want the detail because, and it surprises me that they're not giving it, because this agency's reputation has been so tarnished. And frankly, the reputations of Cash and Dan, where they were at the beginning of this administration as compared to where they are now, they have been diminished too, mainly because of Epstein. But I also think there are people that are not satisfied with his answers. I'm talking about Kash Patel's answers about the Thomas Crooks investigation. And now, as you're hearing, and I'm sure seeing like we are, you have a lot of people that are unsatisfied with the lack of detail they provided yesterday.
Yeah, and folks on the outside, and I consider myself one of those. I mean, yes, I'm more in the loop in the sense that I do still talk to people that work on the 7th floor at FBI headquarters. I still talk to people that have just retired recently and worked this case back in January of 2021 when it started. But here's the thing. Cases, everyone expects everything to be like a Law and Order episode. The first half hour, the crime happens, it gets investigated. The second half hour, let me just give you my perspective. And the second half hour is neatly wrapped up with a bow. It goes before a jury, and the guy gets convicted and goes to jail for life. It just doesn't work that way. And I'll give you another example of this on the other side. You remember during the global war on terror, and you remember after 9/11, and we were all hell-bent on finding Osama bin Laden. And everybody argued on the left that the reason we didn't catch Osama bin Laden until 2011 with a new president was because George W. Bush misdirected resources and was too focused on Iraq. And if he had just focused on finding and killing al-Qaeda and taking out Osama bin Laden, it would have happened much sooner. It doesn't work that way. Intelligence evolves, and as new information comes in, and you're going to argue and push back and say, Jimmy, what new information? This was looking for a needle in a haystack. This guy was a young, disaffected from what everything the reports are indicating, African-American kid living at home with his mom in a well-to-do suburb did not meet the definition or the typical profile of somebody that would do something like this. You got to follow the evidence. The FBI did that, but to say, well, we had these still photos from this grainy video and they should have been able to identify this guy, it just takes time. And I know 5 years seems like a long time, Dan, but I just don't believe the conspiracy stuff. And as I always say to you, Benjamin Franklin put it best. 3 people can keep a secret when 2 of them are dead. I think it just took this amount of time for the case to get solved, and hopefully they prosecute this guy and he goes to jail for a long time.
Yeah, so here's the thing about that. This is not how it works, and this isn't a Law and Order episode, right? Don't tell me how it doesn't work. I mean, I'm not being pointed with you. I'm just trying to distinguish from what you said. Okay, I don't know how it works. I've never been inside the FBI, but there's some common sense questions that I have and people have that should be addressed. Tell me how it does work. Don't tell me you don't know how it works and it's not like a Law and Order episode. Tell me how it does work. Tell me how this came to pass. Because what you're doing now, you just did. What I believe is it just took this long. But you don't know either, and that's the problem.
Okay.
We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened, and so give us the general trajectory of the last 4 years in terms of how this investigation started and how it proceeded and where we winnowed and how we winnowed our way to this point. Give us the how it does work. And, without revealing anything that would compromise the case against this guy and so on and so forth. And when Bongino says this is just the beginning of the investigation, well, what does that mean? You said you got your guy. So give me more color on that, too. You don't just get to throw out these phrases and wave the flag and say, if you haven't been in law enforcement, you don't know how it works, and you're not allowed to ask questions, and we're not going to tell you what we did. You're just supposed to congratulate us for getting the job done. That's unsatisfying to me.
Fair. All right. So you've got Chicago Cubs fans and White Sox fans are listening to your show. Let's play inside baseball. I'll give it to you on how this happens. So the bombs were apparently planted on January 5th. Okay, right. Once they're discovered, where does the investigation go? Where does it start, and how does it get to the point where we are right now, where we have an indictment and an arrest? Okay. What you do is it starts with concentric circles. You start as close as possible to where the event or the incident or the crime took place, and you work your way out. Dan, there's nothing that occurs today, and especially like a city like Washington, D.C., it's like Chicago, New York City, and L.A., where the entire area is blanketed by CCTV, whether it's, local businesses or whether it's law enforcement, the United States government. There is plenty of videotape of any movements that would have happened in and around that area. So you come up with this mysterious image of this person moving along the spots that would have possibly placed this device. That takes time. From there, you've got to interview people. You've got to do regular gumshoe detective work. You've got to knock on doors. You've got to crowdsource. You've got to use the media. You've got to put things out. You've got to put out a tip line. You have to have people available to take those calls, and then you have to have agents and detectives to triage those things. Dan Bongino did say one thing that was very telling yesterday, that this case was solved not on a tip, but on forensic evidence. Well, you look at it and you say, well, Jimmy, they just said that this guy Cole, his cell phone pinged in all those locations around the same time, and license plate readers picked up his vehicle in that general vicinity around that same time. This should have been open and shut. But how would you get to that? How would you get the information that you need to subpoena this person's cell information? How would you know that that was the vehicle you needed to look at when thousands upon thousands of vehicles had been in and out of matriculating around that area during the day? Dan, I'm not whining. This is the job and the profession life these folks choose.
No, I get it.
Time.
I get it, but my point is to say, okay, so that's the sort of the process that you go through to try and solve a case like this, and the points you raise about, like, yeah, people run around saying, oh, they had his cell phone pings and his license plate reader, but how do you know, but they've got cell phone pings and license plate readers on a lot of people in the region at that same time, and so on and so forth. So how do you drill down to him? That's completely fair, and I understand that takes time, and you've got to use all those other investigative approaches that you just mentioned. My point is to say, so what did the FBI do for the last 3 years? Where was the case when you picked it up, and how did you go from where it was to arresting Brian Cole? That's the only. It's just like, give us the full arc of the investigation with some detail, and everything is sort of what you don't understand, and it's sort of, here's how we do things. Yeah. I know. I want specifics. I want to know what Chris Wray and his FBI did or didn't do, and I want to know what you understood and what you learned when you got in those positions, and what you've done over the last 10 months to get to yesterday, and then what you think about this investigation going forward when Bongino makes a statement like this is just the beginning of it. Fill in those blanks.
Yes, and that will happen at trial. And again, I'm not running cover for the FBI. I've come on your show a million times and been harshly critical of things where the FBI has made mistakes. But in this instance, this is a case right now that is built on a ton of evidence, circumstantial evidence. What does that mean? It means just because somebody went into a Home Depot and bought a plastic cap that's put on the end of a fuse, that does not make them a terrorist or a pipe bomb builder. Yeah. But it's one piece. You add that to the piece where the cell phone towers pinged, where the license plate readers picked up his vehicle, the fact that from the still images taken off of the video, you could determine this individual was between the size of 5'6" and 5'8". He turned out to be 5'7". Dan, all those things are going toward this, but without a confession, or without a clear face, video of this guy, and then him going to his house and you track him there, these are the things that are built into this case. I'm not excusing the fact that it took this long. I'm just suggesting it takes a lot of time for this, and we'll learn a lot more at trial if this ends up going to trial. And I do not blame the FBI for coming out prematurely and saying, well, here's what we have right now. We don't know who the guy is, but we have this, and we're going to continue working. You do that when you need to crowdsource. You do that when it's in the public's best interest, meaning there might be a current threat out there. Otherwise, we do not speak about ongoing investigations.
Yeah, I understand it. And I mean, possibly, I could see from the prosecutor's point of view is to say, don't go back and get too into the weeds here on terms of who did or didn't do what, because if you start saying publicly that the FBI under Christopher Wray did this versus we did that, then maybe you're going to disclose something that could be used by the defense to say somehow the investigation was corrupted, or there are questions about the propriety of actions taken by particular FBI agents in the previous regime or in the current regime. In other words, if you start talking about what everybody did or didn't do, then you raise possible, you potentially imperil the case with what defense attorneys could use to create reasonable doubt.
You said it better than I could. That is exactly the reason. So please understand, and I know you do, I'm not insulting your intelligence. Please understand that these are the kind of things that at the highest levels of the FBI and the Department of Justice, because the FBI director answers underneath the Attorney General, have to be weighed. When is it in the best interest of the public to release information? And when is something that release could potentially imperil a prosecution? I was involved in those decisions, not on this case, but on many other cases. And trust me when I tell you this, Dan. I know you don't like me to say just trust me, but you agonize over it. You don't want to hold on to something that could potentially clear the case or find the bad guy or protect the public, but you have to weigh it against what am I going to do now to potentially imperil the future prosecution, or am I releasing something that helps the bad guys? And that's where I think they are. Look, do I think that Patel and Bongino are the best mouthpieces for this right now? No. I believe the FBI needs reform. I've been agnostic on them for the last year, trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. But there have been a collection of errors of recent where I feel in certain senses they are in over their head. I said it.
James Gagliano, retired FBI supervisory special agent, doctoral candidate in Homeland Security at St. John's. Also, he served as mayor of the village of Cornwall-on-Hudson in New York. Jim, thank you as always. Enjoyed it. Appreciate your time.
Dan, thanks for having me.
And James Gagliano joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
If a Lenovo computer for your business is on your holiday list, don't shop around. Just go directly to the source, Lenovo.com. It's your last chance to get exclusive deals on the PCs you want for your business, like the ThinkPad X9 14 Aura Edition and Yoga 7i 2-in-1. So avoid all that shopping chaos and price comparing and just go directly to the source, Lenovo.com, where PCs